Hey everyone, Steve here, and sorry it's been so long. I do have excuses this time though. There has been a lot of construction going on in my complex here, so there's been all kinds of noise going on outside over the past few weeks, and it just hasn't been very conducive to recording. So, but I'm going to do this today because it seems like it's pretty quiet out there right now. So, welcome to the final video in my 20 favorite movies series, I guess you would call it. We're in the top 5, so let's knock these out and finish this up. All right. Coming in at number 5 is going to be a movie that I would think is on most people's list as just a classic movie. I feel like everyone's probably seen it. I don't have to get into too much about plot and whatnot, because if you haven't seen it, I don't know what's wrong with you. But number 5 is going to be Wizard of Oz. Again, don't need to go into the story too much. I'm sure you already know it. Interesting story, I guess I would have for this movie is that I'm really bad about remembering how old I was at certain points in my life, or when things happened to me, how old I was at the time. I'm really bad about that. But I was young. I was a kid, and I had a fever, like a really high fever, and I was already kind of like, delirious and in that fever state. And I'm in bed and got the TV on, and this movie comes on. I'd never seen it before, and watching this movie while having a fever just added to the surreal nature of it. It's a very strong memory for me. I liked, even at the time, I liked old black and white movies. It made them feel like they were made in a different time, which they were, but in a longer ago time, and it kind of took me out of where I was. I always felt like I was going someplace farther away from where I was. And so this movie comes on, and the beginning is not in black and white, it's in this brown sepia tone, which makes it feel even older to my young mind at the time. I felt like I was watching a really old movie. And there's just something about that drew me in, because I liked old movies at the time. And you've got Over the Rainbow, which is probably arguably one of the best songs ever in a movie. You've got this setup of the characters who are eventually going to also be, they're going to have their own counterparts in Oz. The tornado effects, at least from the outside, when she's inside the house in the tornado, then yeah, and she's looking out the window, those effects look a little dated maybe, but outside, and the wind is whipping around and you see that tornado in the background, it's still a very effective effect shot. It still does hold up today, in my opinion. It still looks amazing to me. So you've got the tornado sequence, and the house crash lands, and she opens that door, and just this world of color just unfolds before her. I can tell you that when I was a kid and I saw this and I was in that fevery state, it just blew my mind at the time. It's a fantasy movie. It's probably the first one that most people have ever seen in their lives, I would think. And you've got just great characters, great costumes, great set design. This vivid, colorful world with this element of danger in it. You've got the witch, and she's got the flying monkeys, and not so terrifying as an adult, but as a kid, yeah, that kind of creeped me out. Dorothy's just like the portrait of innocence. Just everything about this movie is, I won't say perfect, because it's not. But it's pretty close. I think it's more of a respect thing. I just respect the movie so much that I have it as high as I do. I might, if I really stopped and thought about it, and I have thought about it, believe me, but I might have it maybe a little bit lower. But so I have such a respect for it and the effort and that was put into this. I'm usually not a fan of musicals, I should note that, but I'm fine with them as long as the songs serve a purpose to the story. They have to move the story along, and the songs in here do. They do serve a purpose, and they serve the story. Um, Memorable songs, memorable characters. Everything about this movie, you can tell how much care and love was put into it when they made it. It's just a uncomplicated fantasy story with good morals, a good message. Even if I don't personally agree with some of them, there's no place like home. That's a nice sentiment, but let's face it, some people don't have the greatest home life, and maybe there's no place like home doesn't apply to them. But it's a nice sentiment. I can appreciate it for what it is. Um, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on this channel before, there is that one line that wizard, I use that term loosely because he's a hack, basically, he's a fraud, but the wizard says to the Tin Man, to remember that a heart is not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved by others. I've always hated that line, I still hate that line, but it's not going to detract from the overall experience of this movie for me. I guess I like more the idea that if you're looking for something that you think you don't have, a brain, a heart, courage, that you actually do have those things, but you just might have to dig a little bit to have them. The wizard just gives them little tokens. He's not actually giving them the things that they want. They had them all along inside of themselves. They just didn't know it. So I can appreciate that sentimentality as well. It's just a classic fantasy story, and it's done very well. I still just have, again, images of laying in that bed as a child and seeing these characters running up through the witch's castle on the top of the castle, outside the outer edge of it. That image is just burned in my head, and it always will be. So I don't need to say too much more about The Wizard of Oz. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So that's my number 5 movie, and we got, what, 4 more to go. So let's move on. Coming in at number 4, it looks like Oscar's making a pick. We'll see if he comes back later for another one, but it looks like he's picking, which is interesting. Really? This is going to be your pick? All right, well, for number 4, this here is my Alien box set. I think any fan of this series knows that the first 2 movies are really the only ones that matter. The rest really aren't that good. And that's how I feel anyway. Train. As to which one I prefer, when I was younger, I liked the second one, Aliens, because it was an action movie, and it was an action movie. That's why. And plus, the entire end sequence with Ripley and the Queen Alien is one of the best moments in sci-fi history. Let's face it. As I got older and really started to notice more things about movies that you really don't when you're younger, I realized that the original Alien is the superior film, and it's all because of pacing. So my number 4 movie is the original 1979 Alien. If anyone wants to know how to pace a movie and the importance of good pacing, I would say watch Alien. It is paced perfectly. From the opening scenes of just the camera slowly moving through the corridors of that ship, the empty corridors of that ship, and coming into the sleep chamber, and the pods opening up, and the characters awaken, and we meet them, and they're all great actors, and that they're normal people, is that they just are presented as very normal. They're just doing their job. They receive a distress signal from a nearby planet. They go down to investigate. And I think, again, most people have seen this movie. We all know what happens. They stumble across a bunch of eggs. One person foolishly puts their face into it and gets a face hugger attached to their face. They bring him back on the ship. And discover that this creature has impregnated. Let's just talk for a moment about how I almost have a hard time talking about the life cycle of this creature, because it is terrifying. That the alien basically rapes its victims and impregnates them. and a baby grows inside of their chest, and then when it's ready, it bursts out of it. It's horrible, and yet creative, and yet you had never seen anything like this before. You've never seen anything like this since. Um, as far as a monster in a monster movie, um, you've never seen anything like this. I know I still haven't, and it makes me cringe every time. And it, it's truly horrific. Plus the design in this movie, the designs of the creatures, of the creature I should say, and the environments, um, are just so odd. And they're just, it's, you never truly know what you're looking at. Again, the creature is kept in the shadows. You get brief glimpses of it, and again, you know, I've said this before, I love that when you don't quite know what you're looking at, or you don't get a full view of the creature. It's just these little glimpses, um, and just the design in this movie is amazing for a 1979 movie. Um, so once the alien bursts out of Kane's chest, and it always, I never quite understood how it grew up so quickly. It's, you know, it's this little baby when it first bursts out of him, then all of a sudden it's a full-grown creature, but you can let that go. Um, the last half hour of this movie, there's barely any dialogue, there is barely any music. It is just, to me, it's an exercise in how to build tension and pacing and get a hold of your audience and not let go. As the crew members are picked off one by one, we're left with Sigourney Weaver, who is now alone, and she is going to blow up the ship and escape in an escape pod. She sets the self-destruct sequence, and she's racing. And Sigourney Weaver does fear in this movie perfectly. You're racing through these small corridors, and the smoke and the steam and the strobe lights, not knowing where the alien is. And she goes around the corner, and there it is, and ducks back, and the alien is now blocking her escape route. So she goes back to try and stop the self-destruct sequence that she just set. It's too late. It's beyond the point of being stopped. She's got like 5 minutes to get off this ship, so you've got the ticking clock aspect going on. It's non-stop. What I love about movies is if you watch them for the first time, they can have a certain effect on you. But then when you watch them again and again, they don't have the same effect on you. This one does. This entire ending sequence, this whole last half hour of this movie, has me on the edge of my seat. Even though I know what's going to happen, it has me on the edge of my seat every single time. I feel my heart rate go up. I feel myself sweating. I feel myself in that ship with her, panicking. So the clock is ticking. She's got to get off the ship. She gets back. She gets in the escape pod, gets out just as the ship blows up, and we can breathe a sigh of relief until we realize that the alien is inside the escape pod with her. The tension immediately shoots back up through the roof. She's now trapped in an even smaller area with this creature, and it is tension personified as she is slowly trying to get her spacesuit on, get into that control chair, get herself strapped in. I love the fact that she has to turn her back to it to get to she's trapped in the chair now. She's completely defenseless. She's strapped in that chair and has to turn her back to it in order to get to the controls, to open the door to blow it out. She's got the grappling hook at that point, hits it with it just, the door's closed, the tension just keeps going, because now she's got it, it's outside, but now it's attached to the hook, it's stuck in the door. She has to blow it out with the engine. Pacing. This is probably the most perfectly paced movie that I've ever seen. That slow burn beginning, that sense of normalcy, a shock happens, and then you're still trying to figure out what's going on. The chest bursting scene, from that point on, it's just relentless. And to build that tension up, to have her escape and then make the audience relax for a moment and then shoot the tension straight back up again, it's perfect. It's perfect to me. There's also the interesting subplot, which is not necessary, but it's there, that that Ash is actually an android, and that he was kind of the orchestrator of all this. So there's that like betrayal aspect to the whole thing. But, okay, so there may be a weird cut in there because my memory card just got full. I'm sitting here talking and my camera's beeping at me because the memory card was full. So there might be a jump in there. But yeah, number 4, Alien. Perfectly paced, tense as hell, stressful as hell, and it is the perfect example of how to grab your audience, keep them grabbed, keep a hold of them until the very end. And that is why in my older years I preferred it over the sequel Aliens, which is worthy of watching, believe me. It's a classic sci-fi action movie. Whereas the original Alien is that slow burn, suspenseful horror movie in space, is basically what it is. So, and apparently it's Oscar's pick unless he makes an appearance for the last 3 movies on this list, which he's laying in the sunshine over here, so I think that might be it. I think he's actually going to pick Alien as his favorite movie. Interesting, Oscar. Very interesting. All right. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Back to the Future. The original. The sequels are acceptable and worthy of your time, but the original Back to the Future is a classic. I find that when you're dealing with time travel in movies, sometimes it can get very confusing. I'm the kind of person who thinks about things too much, and I really start to think about, well, if this happened in the past, then this wouldn't happen in the future, and it can mess with my mind a bit. Back to the Future presents time travel in a very accessible way. I don't find it confusing at all. It seems very logical. Everything about it is very acceptable. And I never question it for a moment. You've got Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. You've got the great Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. Christopher Lloyd has appeared twice now in my top 20, as well as people, directors and whatnot, like Spielberg and Zemeckis. Robert Zemeckis obviously directed this. These are people that are Tom Hanks. You're seeing I'm beginning to see a pattern that I never noticed before. When I think about my favorite movies, is that there are certain actors and certain directors that make appearances in my top movies. I always found it interesting that Marty and Doc were friends. How does this high school kid and this old man become friends? But what I love is that it works. You never question it until you actually, right now, I stop and think about it. But you never question it. They've got such amazing chemistry. They work so well together that you just accept these two as friends, and their friendship is important to you. And time travel, very accessible. This movie has everything. It has comedy, it has science fiction, it has adventure, it has a bit of a love story. It takes elements from every possible genre and puts them into one movie that is just a fun adventure. I believe that as they were trying to find a distributor for the idea originally, that a lot of people turned them down, particularly Disney, because of the whole mother and son, the mother falling in love with her son. On paper, that sounds really creepy, that a mother falls in love with her or has a crush on her son. That sounds really creepy on paper. But it's presented in this movie as so innocent. And, she doesn't know that it's her son. She doesn't know that. And it's presented in such an innocent way that I love that you can take a concept like that would be kind of twisted and creepy, and make it genuine and make it sweet. Make it really sweet. So basically Marty interferes with his parents' first meeting. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but you all know this story. Doc Brown has made a time machine out of a car. Marty accidentally goes back to the 50s, where his parents first meet and first fall in love, and he inadvertently interferes with that, and thereby puts his own existence in jeopardy. And now he has to quickly, over the course of a week, because again, that ticking clock. I love ticking clock aspects in movies where somebody's racing against time. He has to find a way to get his parents together. And ticking clock is because in order to get back to the 1980s, he has to use a lightning bolt that he knows is going to hit the clock tower in order to fuel the car to get home. Again, the ending sequence where they're trying to get Marty back home, and Doc is on that clock tower and with the wires, and the wires are coming undone, and it every time, even though you know what's going to happen, you know there's going to be a happy ending, I'm on edge every time, and you have that hurry kind of feeling, because you care about these characters and you want to see them succeed, and it's such a fun movie. It's such a quotable movie. I mean, you can spout quotes from this movie all day long. And I find it interesting that a movie about time ends up being timeless. Yes, there are things in it that are very 80s. And then when he's in the past, there are things that are very 50s. But it's timeless. The movie doesn't feel dated at all, even though it's about these two specific time periods. The people who made this, who are responsible for this, are just geniuses. Robert Zemeckis, Spielberg. We know their work. We know that they're amazing at what they do, and they are perfect at creating these timeless movies. I can't say enough good about it. I'm sure everyone's seen it. If you haven't, check it out, and check out the sequels as well. They are very good. But it's a standalone movie. You could watch the first Back to the Future on its own and be content with just that. And because it's a perfect movie. I don't like to use the word perfect. I mean, I'm sure if I were to really think about it, I could find fault with all the movies on this list, except for my number one. We'll get to that. But I could find some minuscule little thing to nitpick about, I'm sure. But we're really getting into territory right now of movies that I feel are really close to perfect. And Back to the Future is one of them. And that's why it's at number 3. All right, coming in at number 2. I've got my Lord of the Rings movies here, and it would be really easy for me to just do a cop-out and say that Lord of the Rings is my second favorite movie of all time. But it is 3 movies. Now, I could argue the fact that Tolkien himself didn't want his book to be split into 3 parts. His publisher kind of forced it. The cost of paper and all that, I guess. Because these 3 movies are, as well as the 3 books, are one continuous story. It's not like other sequels where you could watch one and then it's a complete story on its own. It is one story, but it's actually very easy for me to pick a favorite of the 3. And my pick for number 2 is The Fellowship of the Ring, the first part. It's the most complete story. It's the most non-fragmented story. You know, parts 2 and 3 really get very fragmented, even in the book. And you're kind of split up between different storylines. I read the book when I was very young, probably too young to really fully appreciate it. And then I've read it as I've gotten older. I've been in love with this world for so long, and to finally see it on screen, presented in such a perfect way, it just blew my mind. Right from the get-go, to see Hobbiton on the screen, just as I always imagined it. It was such a powerful experience when I was sitting in that movie theater and saw this. It's a story that now here's my CGI, not rant, my CGI discussion. This is a story that requires it. You have to. It deals with these very fantastical locations and creatures, and you have to use CGI to fully realize it. And I think that's why nobody had ever made a live-action version of this story up until this point. Again, I'm not opposed to CGI as long as 2 things. A, it does not, most importantly, it does not distract from the characters. And it doesn't here. Yes, there's lots of fantastical elements, but it still is about the characters. I hope that we never reach a point in movies where the human spirit gets overshadowed. I think we are kind of getting to that point by just effects thrown at the screen. This movie never takes away from the human element. Number 2 is that there's still practical work. As much CGI as there is in this, there are practical effects. There are models. that are so detailed that the camera can get right in on them, and you don't know that what you're looking at is a model. You don't. They look amazing. So there's a lot of the love and effort and time that went into making these movies can't be disputed as far as I'm concerned. There are those who will say that there's too many deviations from the book. Look, books and movies are two different mediums. What works in one doesn't work in another. You have to make changes. Am I happy with all of the changes that were made in The Lord of the Rings? No. There's some that I could do without. Especially which is why it was easy for me to pick the first one. Especially in the second and third, there's things that are added, taken out from the book that, do they distract from the experience as a whole for me? No. But I can do without them. You've got great actors here. The great Ian McKellen as Gandalf. To me, he is Gandalf. Gandalf is my favorite character in the book, and I think that he is portrayed perfectly by Ian McKellen in this movie. Seeing him fall on that bridge with the Balrog still gets me every time, even though you know that even though he's going to return, but in a way he's not, because Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White are two different characters. It's hard to really understand that, but they are. Speaking of movies always having the same effect on you every time that you watch them, I cry at the end of this movie every single time. You have got these 9 characters who are bonded together, different races, different cultures, and they're coming together to fight this evil and to take this ring to Mordor, and everything starts to fall apart. Frodo realizes that the ring is going to destroy all of them. It's going to corrupt all of them one by one. Sooner or later, it's going to happen to all of them. And he chooses to go on his own, to leave them. And then, of course, as we all know, his friend Sam won't let that happen. He's going to go with him, one way or another. And that feeling of loneliness and safety in numbers, but then knowing that you can't rely on that. You've got to do things on your own sometimes. And then in this case, he doesn't have to because Sam comes along. And that friendship, that pure friendship, I think is something that we all want. There's not many of us that can say that we've got a friend like Sam, who is willing to go towards his death. These two characters feel like they believe they're going to die. They believe that they are walking towards their death, but they're going to do it together. That's friendship, and it's the most beautiful portrayal of friendship that I think I've ever read or seen, and it makes me cry every single time, without fail. I will cry at the end of this movie every time. You've got amazing actors, memorable characters, powerful performances, wonderful miniature work, wonderful CGI work, all to tell this timeless story. What makes the book so great is that it's a fantasy story, yes, but if you strip away all of that, you have got a story about characters. And that's always the most important thing in a story, are the characters, and how you can relate to them and put yourself in their position. I don't want to go too long with a lot, especially this and probably the next, my number 1 movie. I'm probably going to ramble on for far too long about it. I think I've had too much caffeine today. I feel like I'm already talking kind of fast, but The Lord of the Rings as a whole is one of my favorite movies. But if I have to pick one, it's pretty easily The Fellowship of the Ring, the first one. It gets me every time. In many ways, it gets me every time. Alright, so we've made it. Finally, this has taken far too long, and I'm sorry about that. I don't mean just this video, I mean this series as a whole. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, but we've reached number 1. Anyone who knows me knows, and I've said this numerous times on this channel, I'm a fan. I think I probably said it earlier when I talked about Roger Rabbit. I'm a fan of animation. 2D hand-drawn animation it's my passion, it's where my heart lies. And if anyone were to ask me why, and because I would say that particularly the 1940s is really when animation was, to me, at its peak from all the studios that were doing it at the time. And if anyone were to ask me why, I would say two things. I would say watch any of the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoons from that era, because they are the funniest, still to this day, the funniest cartoons ever made. As far as writing, dialogue, slapstick comedy, those types of things. The second thing I would tell you as to why I love animation from the 1940s would be to watch my number one movie of all time. And people are usually surprised by this, but it is Pinocchio. To me, like I said, I don't like to throw the word perfect around, but to me, Pinocchio is perfect movie in every way. It shows what is truly capable with ink and paint, and some trickery here and there, smoke and mirrors kind of stuff, to watch this movie, I'm in awe every single time I see it, because of how it was made. It was made with people's hands. It was all made with hands, drawing and painting. And what they created was something so beautiful on the screen that I can't even put it into words. This is just the pinnacle of animation. If there is a movie that looks as astounding as Pinocchio, I haven't seen it. I don't think I ever will. You have got animators that are at the top of their game. And in such a short time period, if you look even just 5-7 years before this movie, if you look at the kind of cartoons that they were putting out at the time, just the vast difference. I mean, we're only at this point maybe 10 years or so away from like rubber hose animation with characters with stretchy limbs and rubbery bodies, and then to see that and then to watch this movie, the leaps and bounds that were made are astounding. You've got great voice work. You can't imagine anybody, another voice for Jiminy Cricket than what you've got. So you've got great characters as well. You've got great villains. It's very episodic in how it's told. So, Pinocchio gets into one jam and then gets out of it and then goes into another one. So because of that structure, you get to go to these amazing locations. Stromboli Stage, the evils of Pleasure Island, to the bottom of the ocean, and ultimately into the belly of a whale. I defy anyone to watch the monster of the whale sequence at the end of this movie and not tell me that there's anything better done in hand-drawn animation than that sequence. I defy you to tell me that, because there's not. There's a handful of songs. They're all very memorable. I mean, When You Wish Upon a Star. I mean, come on. It's the theme song for the entire Disney company, and it has been ever since 1940. It's one of the best songs in a movie of all time. You have Give a Little Whistle, which is just a fun little song that Jiminy Cricket sings once he's made Pinocchio's conscience. I love the fact that such an imperfect character is put in this position of being Pinocchio's conscience. Jiminy has got a good sense of right and wrong, but he's not perfect. He's probably not the best man for this job. I mean, he oversleeps on his first day. It's classic that to have characters who have flaws, and that he's put in this position of such importance, but he's not perfect himself. But Give a Little Whistle is a great song. I've caught myself humming it more times than I probably should. Some of the songs are ironic. You've got Honest John singing about how great it is to be famous and a celebrity, and yet he's using the song in a deceptive way to trick Pinocchio into slavery, basically. Pinocchio is on Stromboli's stage singing I've Got No Strings. He's singing about freedom, and yet at that moment, he's not free at all. He's a prisoner, he just doesn't know it yet. So the songs are ironic. I've Got No Strings also is this multicultural song when puppets of different nations are all coming down and joining into it. It's just amazing. Um, you've got music from the songs kind of weaving their way throughout. Um, Little Wooden Head is actually used in a melancholy way as Geppetto is searching for Pinocchio. Um, this sweet little song now becomes somber. Um, Show me something that's more terrifying than Pleasure Island and the kids being turned into donkeys. What? Again, it's done masterfully. Lampwick turning into a donkey. It's right up there with some of the scariest horror movies I've ever seen in the way that it's presented. It's a dark movie um, in regards to things like that. Um, the camera work is amazing. And again, you're talking about an animated movie. There are shots from above looking down, from below, like from Jiminy's perspective looking up. Um, you've got that amazing shot of when the first morning after Pinocchio, comes alive, and he's going to go off to school, and the camera. And this is in a movie today, this would be very simple to have a camera do these things, but what went into making this, just this one shot, to have the camera zoom in through the town, through the village, and then also as it's zooming in, pan across at the same time. And it was all done with multiplane cameras and whatnot, but it's astounding. I'm in awe every time I watch this. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I've seen that movie 100 times," but you don't really mean it. You haven't actually seen the movie 100 times. Um, I've easily seen this movie 100 times. Easily. No joke. And I'm in awe every single time. Um, it takes you to these amazing locations. The animation is flawless. It is perfect, in my opinion. I can't say enough good things about it. It's why it's my #1 movie. To the point where I'm like literally getting tongue-tied right now, even trying to describe how much this movie means to me. It is the pinnacle of what people can do, what true artists are capable of doing in a movie. It's great characters, perfect songs, perfect camera work, perfect cinematography, perfect animation. To me, it's perfect, and I can't say enough good things about it. If you haven't seen it, or it's been a long time since you have seen it, I know with Disney movies sometimes they go out of circulation for a while and whatnot, but check it out if you can, when you get the chance. If you're a fan of animation, or if you're a fan of art, you owe it to yourself to see it, as far as I'm concerned. It just astounds me every time I see it. It is my favorite movie of all time. And it's why, if you were to ask me why I love animation, specifically 1940s, and this was released in 1940, 1940s kind of animation, I would say just watch Pinocchio. Watch Pinocchio, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. If you have the same kind of passion as I do for this kind of artwork. Really watch the backgrounds. The backgrounds are beautiful to look at, and and just go on the ride. Go from the creepiness of Stromboli's stage to the absolute horror of Pleasure Island, to the majestic and yet terrifying ocean, and inside that whale's belly, and just go for it, and just go along with that ride, and at the end, again, there's that message that if you're good, and if you do the right thing in life, that good things will come to you. Do I always believe that? Maybe not, but it's a sentiment that I can kind of latch onto and carry with me, and hopefully if I do the right thing in life, then good things will come, and that's all we can really do. So yeah, my number one movie of all time is Pinocchio. So there you go. We finally done it. We have finally gotten through all 20 of these movies. So there you have it, folks. My top 20 favorite movies. Hope everyone enjoyed this. Feel free, anybody, drop a comment. If you want to talk about any of these movies, I love talking about movies. I really do. So I'm always interested in talking to people about movies. So if you want, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. I'm probably going to save things for a separate video. I haven't done a park vlog all year. It kills me I haven't done that, so I'm probably going to do that soon, because there are some things I need to talk about that directly pertain to this channel. But I'm still here. I'm okay. Oscar's okay. That's all that matters, I guess. But there are some things I need to talk about. I'm probably going to do that at some point in the future, like in a park vlog or something, because I haven't done one of those yet this year. So I will see you around for that. And until then, everyone, watch movies, enjoy them, because they're very powerful things that can affect us and teach us and move us. And that's something I hope that we never lose. So watch those movies, everybody, okay? And everyone take it easy. Have a good day. Peace. And I'll see you around, okay? Bye.